Hey guys, this is going to be a tutorial on Blueprint utilities and slice of life features. The first one I'll show is alignment of nodes. This one's pretty commonly used. So here I have my spaghetti code. The nodes are all over the place. I could nudge them into place, try to get them straight, but really there's a lot of faster ways of doing it. You can either just select all of them, right click, and go to alignment. Then you'll see there's different types of ways you can align them. But the most common one used is just selecting all of them, pressing Q. This straightens the wires, and you can just place it where you need to. Next, I'm going to show how to drag several wires at once, so you don't have to do this. So instead of having to do that, if you just hold Ctrl over a pin, click and drag, it moves all of them together. Next, I want to show variable categories. So right now I have a variable category for strings. Inside of it there is names and nicknames. And if I were to click on the variable and go to categories and click, you'll see I have default. Right? If I click at that, it's no longer going to be in the string category. If I want to make my own category, you can click on the default and just type in whatever you want. So types of names. And now you'll notice there is a type of names variable category. I could go here now and change the nicknames to go there. And you'll notice my last category is now gone because there was nothing in it. Next, I want to show the find results feature. So typically you can either go to Windows, find in blueprints, find blueprints 1, but typically in your blueprints there is a find results tab down here. This helps you find a reference or where a certain function or event is being called. And for example, you can type in events results 1 and you'll notice it pops up here. If I double click on it, it focuses in on it. It's really helpful for when you can't find a certain blueprint or event or function. You can type in what you want to look for and you don't have to search around your graph for it. It's right here. Or sneak a little event in the middle of nowhere that we couldn't find for some reason. Okay. Additionally, you can do a find for all, and if you do that by searching print string and then clicking this magnifying glass, it's going to search through every blueprint in your project that uses this event or function, and this tells you the path in the files that you can use to find said event. You can double click on it and it will also take you to the location where the event or function is being called. Next, I want to show breakpoints. Breakpoints are super helpful for seeing the flow of data and the flow of how things are being executed in your code. To do this, you would first right click on a node, toggle breakpoint. Now if I click play, you'll notice since this was on a begin play, what happened was the play session immediately paused, and it paused at the point that I reached this function. So right now it's paused at this point, and if I were to click step over or resume, the play session would continue same as always. Now this is really helpful because it allows you to see the flow of data and the values as they change. For example, I have this float here. I want to be able to see it's 0 right now. I want to be able to see what value it is as I'm going through my code. What you can do is you can either hover over it and see current value, or you can right click and click watch this value, and it is basically telling you the result of this value, which is really great in conjunction with breakpoints, as you'll see when I toggle breakpoint here. If I click play, it pauses at the first print string. Notice how my float is 0. If I do step over, it will, which is F10, it will go to the next node. Right now it's still 0, but notice after I do that and go to the next one, my value is now 1. If I step over again, it'll just resume play session like normal. And yep. So next I want to show breaking and splitting pins. Now typically a vector consists of an x, y, and z. What you can do is drag off of it and type in break. Now that it's filled with the context, what you are giving it is a vector, it'll recommend break vector. What this does is that it essentially splits the vector into its individual pieces of data. And you can now use this for your other calculations. So if you wanted to get the specific rotation of a character, you could do that. And this would allow you to, for example, get the z rotation of an object, so which direction it's facing. Another way of doing this is getting your variable or your pin, right click on it, and split struct pin. And you'll notice it essentially has the same data. Now, a more advanced and often used way of using the break is with line trace results or collision tests. So this is a line trace. It's a line. If it hits something, it returns a result. If I drag off and type in break, I get this pin right here. If I can click this arrow, I'll get more data. But essentially, this is the result of this line trace. It gives you who it hit, where it hit, the location, what was the time, a bunch of other data of the hit results. You could alternatively go to the line trace by channel and go to the struct, which is this blue pin typically, and split struct pin. And you'll have the same data as you have here. But it does add a lot of congestion to this one function. So typically for line trace by channel, I like to use the break. But for things with smaller amounts of structs, variables typically doing this is very good. You can also make a temporary primitive variable, such as a vector, by using the make vector. So we have break, which splits the variable, and this one makes a temporary vector using the data. If you type in make, you'll notice you have a bunch of other options, such as make transform, make vector 4, right? And you can use this to feed data to blueprints and other nodes without needing to make variables for them and without needing to set them, especially. So this is like making a local variable in a way. Next, I want to show collapsing nodes. So if you have a lot of nodes and you want to collapse them into categories similar to how we collapse the variables, you can select them and right click, and you'll notice under organization there's different types of ways of collapsing. You can collapse things to a node, you can collapse them to function, or a macro. If you collapse it to a node, it essentially just condenses it into a category like this. And if I double click on it, here's the code it's going to run. But notice how nothing is plugged into here, so it's essentially never going to run. To make it run, you can click on the graph, add an input, and make this input an exec. Now it'll be able to receive input. If I go in here, notice how my input, I can plug this in, and now if this ever received an event, it would be able to fire. Additionally, you can also click output and it would create a second parameter. Another way you can condense these is into either a function or macro. Functions are typically the way if you are planning to use this function throughout several of your classes and you're planning to override and use class inheritance. Macros are typically just used for this one class you are in, and they have more functionality in the terms of nodes you can use, but don't carry over as well to other classes. Additionally, there are nodes that you can't run in a function that you can run in a macro, such as latent functions and latent calls, such as a delay node, so waiting a certain amount of time before calling something, or a timeline node, which are both very helpful nodes used pretty often in game programming. So the choice between function and macro comes down to class hierarchy and what kind of nodes you think you'll need access to after it's collapsed. Next, I want to show the insert and find asset tool. Basically, it's just this arrow and this magnifying glass. You could click here and then find the bound charge you wanted, but if you had a ton of assets, it would be very annoying to have to scroll through all this. Sometimes you know where your animation is. And after you know where your animation is, if you click on it in your content browser, go back to the blueprint and click this arrow, it'll load it into it. If you also have an asset here and want to know where it is, you can click browse and it would take you to the folder that it's located in. Sometimes variables and values are changed through development, such as this material here. And I'd want to bring it back to normal, whatever the default is in the class. So when you want to bring a value of a variable or data type back to its default value of the class, you can just typically click this yellow arrow and it would bring it back to it would be by default. If you want to call an event in the viewport, such as by creating a button for your level designers to press to, for example, create a cube or create stuff, spawn objects, and you want to be able to call this in the editor, you can call an editor, and what this would do is this would allow you to click a button in the viewport and then have it print out whatever you needed. It could be this public variable that you can make public by clicking this eyeball. So let's say our name. And then when we go to the third person BP, you'll notice you have a name section because we made this variable public. And typically there would be a button as well to accompany it. But this blueprint has been having some issues in regards to that. But typically it works. And then lastly, I want to show you the reference viewer. Reference viewer is a very easy way of finding what things are referring to a certain asset. So where are the references? This is especially helpful if you're trying to delete files or move them around. If you right click on an asset and click reference viewer, it'll bring up a visual graph representing what is connected to what and what is using what. So as you can see here, our BP utility is using the character types enumerator somewhere. Could also do for this animation. And you'll notice this animation is being used here as well. So this is being used in here. Typically that's the order. Yes, the thing on the right is being used on the thing on the left. That's it for this tutorial. Next, I'll be covering some flow control nodes.